For most people passing through, the town of Havenport felt forgettable. Tree-lined streets, early closing shops, a courthouse that looked older than the town's own memory. It was the kind of place where crime came in predictable shapes: a stolen car, a bar fight, an argument that went too far. Nothing ever lingered, nothing ever stayed unsolved. And then, one case did. It began on a cold Tuesday morning in late October. No storm, no warning, just a quiet sunrise and a routine patrol call that would slowly unravel everything the town believed about crime and about itself. At 6:18 a.m., a city maintenance worker reported something unusual near the river access road. He didn't use the word body at first. He said, "There's something wrong down here." By 6:32 a.m., police tape was up. By 7:05 a.m., the first detectives arrived. And by noon, it was clear this was not a crime that followed any known pattern. The victim was identified as Daniel Mercer, 42 years old, no criminal record, no known enemies, married, one child, a systems analyst who worked remotely for a regional firm. Nothing about Daniel's life pointed toward violence, but the scene did. There were no signs of forced entry, no clear murder weapon, no struggle in the surrounding area. And yet, Daniel was dead. Detectives documented everything: footprints, soil disturbance, riverbank impressions, but nothing connected cleanly. The injuries didn't match common assault cases, the positioning didn't align with accidents, and the lack of witnesses made timelines unreliable. It wasn't messy, it was confusing. By the afternoon briefing, the department's tone had shifted. Officers weren't trading theories anymore. They were trading doubts. The crime didn't fit robbery. It didn't fit personal conflict. It didn't fit organized crime. It didn't even fit the town. The lead detective, Elias Grant, had seen enough cases to trust patterns. Patterns were how crime spoke. Patterns were how investigators listened. But this case was silent. Grant stood at the riverbank longer than he needed to, not because he missed evidence, but because he couldn't place the logic of the crime. Who brings someone here and leaves nothing behind? He later asked. The autopsy only deepened the mystery. Cause of death was confirmed, but it didn't answer why. There were no defensive wounds. Toxicology came back clean. Time of death fell inside a narrow window where Daniel should have been home, asleep. His phone was missing. His wallet was untouched. His car was parked neatly in his driveway. Every rule investigators relied on, motive, opportunity, behavior, failed to line up. And when detectives went door to door, the answers were consistent in the worst way possible. "I didn't hear anything." He kept to himself. "Nice guy, quiet, no problems that I know of." By day 3, rumors began spreading faster than facts. People whispered about strangers, about secrets, about things the town didn't want to admit. But inside the department, a quieter truth was forming. This wasn't a case with missing pieces. This was a case built from pieces that didn't belong together. And that scared them more than an obvious killer ever could. Because crimes that don't fit patterns don't just resist solving, they change the rules. And this was only the beginning. By the 4th day, pressure began to build. Not from the media — Havenport barely made the regional news — but from inside the department itself. Detectives don't fear unsolved cases on day 1. They fear them when the obvious answers start collapsing. And the first obvious answer was simple. Someone Daniel Mercer knew had done this. It was the theory that made the most sense. It always did. Statistically, violence rarely comes from nowhere. It comes from proximity: family, coworkers, friends, quiet grudges that grow unnoticed. So investigators turned inward. They began with Daniel's home. Nothing was disturbed, no forced entry, no sign of panic. His laptop sat open on the kitchen table, an unfinished email drafted the night before. Coffee grounds still in the machine. His wedding ring lay beside the sink, exactly where his wife said he always left it. That detail alone caught attention. People don't remove wedding rings unless they plan to put them back on. Next came the interviews. Daniel's wife, Laura Mercer, answered every question without hesitation. Her timeline was tight, supported by phone records and security footage from a grocery store 30 miles away. She had been visiting her sister overnight, something Daniel himself had texted friends about earlier that evening. No deception, no cracks. Co-workers described Daniel as dependable, almost invisible. No disputes, no recent tension. One colleague mentioned Daniel had declined a promotion months earlier, not out of fear, but out of preference. He liked quiet. Friends told the same story. Too consistent, too clean. Detective Grant grew uneasy. Criminal cases often reveal something, an argument, a financial stressor, a hidden relationship. But Daniel's life was a straight line. The more detectives pulled at it, the less it unraveled. So they pivoted. If not family or friends, maybe opportunity. They reconstructed Daniel's last known movements. The night before his death, he had left home briefly around 10:40 p.m. That much was confirmed by a neighbor's security camera catching his car exiting the driveway. But where he went and why remained unclear. No purchases, no phone pings, no witnesses. The river access road where his body was found wasn't on his usual routes. It wasn't near restaurants or shops. It wasn't a place people wandered into accidentally. Someone had brought him there, or convinced him to go. Detectives searched for signs of a meeting, a secret contact, a burner phone, anything that suggested coordination. They found nothing. And then came the first mistake. An anonymous tip arrived through the department's hotline. The caller suggested Daniel had been involved in an argument weeks earlier at a local marina, an argument with a man known for a violent temper. It sounded promising. It sounded familiar. Officers tracked the man down within hours. He had priors, he had motive, at least on paper. He lived 10 minutes from the river. But when detectives checked the details, the story collapsed. The argument never happened. The marina manager confirmed it. Security footage placed the man elsewhere that night. The tip was false. Whether it was a misunderstanding or something darker, no one knew, but it forced the department to confront an uncomfortable truth. Someone wanted them looking in the wrong direction. By the end of the week, the case file had grown thicker, but clarity had vanished. Every traditional investigative path had dead-ended. No motive that made sense, no suspect who held up under scrutiny, no pattern to lean on. Detective Grant wrote a note in the margins of the case file that night, something he rarely did. This crime was planned around our expectations. That realization shifted everything, because crimes that defy patterns aren't accidents, they are intentional. And whoever was responsible hadn't just committed a murder, they'd designed a puzzle, one meant to exhaust the people trying to solve it.
The breakthrough didn't come with flashing lights or raised voices. It came quietly, almost embarrassingly so. Detective Grant found it while reviewing the file alone, late at night, long after the station had emptied, the kind of hour when patterns feel louder and excuses thinner. He wasn't looking for anything new. He was looking for what they had already dismissed. The river access site had been examined thoroughly. Soil samples, tire tracks, water flow, vegetation, everything measurable had been cataloged. Everything dramatic had been exhausted. But one small detail kept reappearing in the photos. Daniel Mercer's shoes. They were clean. Not spotless, but clean enough to raise a question no one had asked out loud. The riverbank where Daniel was found was muddy year-round. Even in dry months, the ground near the water stayed soft and uneven. First responders had struggled to keep their footing that night. Yet Daniel's shoes showed minimal soil disturbance, no deep impressions, no dragging marks, no signs he had walked far from the vehicle. That suggested something subtle and deeply important. Daniel hadn't approached the river on foot. He had been placed there. Grant cross-checked the initial reports. The position of the body had been labeled consistent with collapse, a reasonable assumption at the time. A man alone near water, no defensive injuries, no witnesses. But assumptions harden quickly in investigations. Once labeled, they tend to stay that way. Grant pulled the autopsy report back out. Cause of death was ruled accidental drowning complicated by blunt force trauma. The injury had been attributed to a fall, striking a rock or embankment, but the medical examiner had included a note in the margins: impact angle inconsistent with forward momentum. It hadn't been highlighted, it hadn't been challenged, it had simply lived there. Grant requested a quiet meeting with the medical examiner the next morning. No formal reopening, no announcements, just questions. Together, they reviewed the injuries again, this time without the assumption of a fall, without the pressure to fit the evidence into a tidy narrative. The conclusion shifted. The trauma wasn't consistent with Daniel losing his balance. It was consistent with being struck, once, from the side. Enough to disorient, not enough to leave obvious marks, enough to make resistance impossible. If Daniel had been unconscious when he entered the water, the drowning would have been silent, fast, invisible. The case was no longer about where Daniel went that night. It was about who met him before he ever reached the river. Grant reopened the timeline, not outward, but inward. He focused on the 10-minute window between Daniel leaving his house and his phone going dark, a window investigators had originally dismissed as uneventful. They rechecked traffic cameras, not for Daniel's car, but for others nearby. They examined license plate data again, this time looking for familiarity, not strangers. And that's when something emerged. A car that appeared near Daniel's neighborhood more than once that week, always briefly, always within a block, never suspicious enough to stand out. The car belonged to someone Daniel knew, someone who had never been interviewed, not because they were overlooked, but because their presence had seemed too ordinary to question. By the end of the day, Grant updated the case status internally. Not accidental, not inconclusive, but pending reclassification. For the first time since the investigation began, the evidence wasn't fighting back. It was aligning. And the case that didn't fit any pattern was beginning to reveal one. Not loud, not obvious, but carefully hidden beneath familiarity and trust. The kind of pattern only visible once you stop asking what happened and start asking who wanted it to look accidental. The name had been in the file since the first week. Not highlighted, not circled, not flagged, just present. Evan Rhodes, a longtime acquaintance of Daniel Mercer, former co-worker, someone who had shared lunches, complaints about management, even weekend drinks years earlier. The kind of person investigators instinctively trust because familiarity feels safe. Evan had given a brief statement early on, cooperative, calm, helpful without being eager. He told officers he hadn't seen Daniel in months. At the time, there was no reason to push. Now, there was every reason to return. Detective Grant didn't announce the follow-up interview. He didn't want Evan rehearsed or defensive. He wanted normal, the kind that cracks when pressure is applied gently. They met at Evan's office, not the station. Neutral ground, glass walls, neutral tones, a place where lies echo louder because everything else is quiet. Grant began casually, work, life, the town. He let Evan talk about schedules, stress, routine. People reveal patterns when they believe they're filling silence. Then Grant shifted. "Your car," he said lightly. "You were driving the silver sedan back then, right?" Evan nodded, too quickly. Grant showed him a still image, not accusatory, not dramatic, just a traffic camera frame, slightly blurred, time-stamped. The same silver sedan, 3 blocks from Daniel's house, 2 nights before his death. Evan's expression barely changed, but his breathing did. He laughed once, softly. That could be anyone's car. Grant didn't argue. Instead, he placed another photo beside it. Same vehicle, different angle, different night. Then a third. Now Evan stopped smiling. Grant let the silence do the work. Evan finally spoke. He said he'd driven through the area occasionally, said it was a shortcut, said it meant nothing. Grant nodded, then asked the question that mattered. Why did your phone ping off-grid for 9 minutes the night Daniel died? That wasn't in the original report, because no one had looked for it. Evan leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, familiar posture. He said his phone died. Grant slid one final document across the table, a quiet thing, almost polite. Phone records. Battery never dropped below 60%. Evan stared at it longer than necessary. And then he made a mistake. He said Daniel had been drinking that night. Grant hadn't told him that. No toxicology details had been released publicly. No mention of alcohol beyond speculation. The room changed. Grant didn't raise his voice, didn't accuse. He just asked, "How do you know that?" Evan hesitated, the first real pause of the conversation. Long enough. The truth didn't spill out all at once. It never does. It arrived in fragments. Resentment over a promotion, a confrontation that wasn't supposed to escalate, a push meant to intimidate, not injure. Daniel fell, hit his head. Panicked decisions followed. The river wasn't planned, it was convenient. By the time Evan finished speaking, the story no longer sounded accidental. It sounded desperate. Grant ended the interview without an arrest. That part would come later. Because confessions are only powerful when they're supported by evidence, and now, finally, the evidence was ready to speak. The case that didn't fit any pattern hadn't been random at all. It had been personal. And the most dangerous crimes, Grant knew, aren't committed by strangers in the dark. They're committed by people who believe they'll never be questioned. Arrests don't always come with drama. Sometimes they come with paperwork. 2 days after Evan Rhodes' interview, a warrant was signed quietly. No sirens, no press, no spectacle. Investigators didn't want reaction. They wanted control. Evan was taken into custody outside his apartment just at sunrise. Neighbors noticed police vehicles, but no one heard shouting, no resistance. Just a man stepping out of a life he believed was still intact. Inside the station, the tone was different than before. This time, the questions weren't exploratory, they were confirmatory. Evan was confronted with the full picture: traffic footage, phone records, corrected timelines, medical analysis. Each piece reinforced the same conclusion. Daniel Mercer's death was not an accident. It was the result of a confrontation fueled by resentment and miscalculation. When Evan finally spoke again, his words no longer tried to explain. They tried to minimize. Prosecutors didn't rely on the confession alone. They never do. Instead, they rebuilt the case from the ground up, this time without assumptions. They showed how familiarity allowed Evan to approach Daniel unnoticed, how the location by the river wasn't random but convenient, how the lack of visible struggle wasn't proof of innocence but proof of incapacitation. In court, the defense tried to resurrect the original ruling. They leaned heavily on the early classification of the death as accidental. They argued reasonable doubt, procedural gaps, human error. But the evidence no longer contradicted itself. It aligned. Expert testimony corrected the original medical assumptions. Digital analysts explained the phone data clearly and calmly. Detectives walked the jury through how the case had been misunderstood, not ignored, for years. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. The verdict came back unanimous: guilty. There was no applause in the courtroom, no celebration, just quiet acknowledgement. For Daniel Mercer's family, the moment was heavy but final. Not relief, not joy, closure. Outside the courthouse, Detective Grant spoke briefly to the press. He said, "This case wasn't unsolved, it was unfinished. Today, it's complete." The department issued a statement acknowledging early missteps, not as failures, but as lessons. New review protocols were implemented. Cold cases were reopened with fresh eyes. The town of Havenport didn't change overnight, but something settled. The story people told themselves, that crime always follows patterns, that answers arrive quickly, was replaced with something more honest. Truth takes time. Justice takes persistence. And closure isn't given, it's earned. The crime that didn't fit any pattern hadn't defeated the system, it had strengthened it. Because in the end,
the most important pattern held true. When evidence is allowed to speak without assumptions, the truth eventually answers.